Hey, and welcome to Trail Trials, the video review section of iRunFar.com. My name is Travis Liles, and in this video we're going to take a look at the Hoka One One Torrent 2. Let's start off by digging into the specs. The Torrent 2 comes in at a 5mm drop from heel to toe. It weighs in at 9.1 ounces, even though the advertised is 9.3.5 in a men's size 9. It is supposed to be the lightweight and nimble, or probably in terms of Hoka, their most minimalist trail shoe. So with all that information, let's get up close and personal. Let's take a look at this shoe and all its components and see what it's all about. Let's start off by taking a look at the outsole. So you can kind of see a lot going on, cool patterns here on the bottom. Let's draw your attention to the yellow and the black. The yellow and the black is the outsole itself. And when you look at that from this angle, what you can see is that you've got some pretty deep lugs that are on this shoe, especially for kind of the fact that this is meant to be a little bit faster of a shoe. I think these are really solid lugs that are on this shoe. You have forward-facing lugs in the front, rear-facing lugs in the back to aid in traction going uphill and downhill. They use a slightly sticky rubber compound on here, which I think works well in a lot of conditions. Feels good when you're going across something kind of slick, like a wet bridge or something like that. I feel like there's enough traction on this that it's not an unsafe type of shoe, which I have some trail shoes that are definitely like harder rubber, and because of that, they have a tendency to like almost slide across something like that. This is a nice in-between where there's enough traction here and lug and sort of friction of the rubber type that it's going to provide a little bit more grip. You can see there's a lot of weight savings here, and all of this orange here on the bottom is the midsole. So, you know, I can look at this point right here, roll right across. This is the midsole. So the midsole is exposed in a lot of places. The downside to that is some of these types of things here where the way that this tread is worked out is versus being a full piece that's then laminated to the shoe, there's basically this scenario here where it's almost carved out a little bit and then the tread is like glued down into that hole. Overall, it works pretty well, but you can see in this scenario here, this lug's out on the side, it's out on the corner. It doesn't take much kind of downhill on aggressive terrain for this thing to finally pop. And because there's also not a rock plate in the midsole, you get a little bit of the ground feel on this shoe. And speaking of midsole, let's cross over into the midsole. So if you're a Hoka fan, or if you're someone that's never worn Hokas, you know that Hoka's thing is like max stack height. And this is a much lower stack height. In fact, this falls into what I would call minimal for a Hoka type of shoe. So you can see a much thinner midsole. In general, this is a neutral midsole. There is no pronation control. There's no type of cage that like divert your foot to do anything specific. There's no stability mechanisms. This shoe uses their Pro Fly foam, which is the same foam they use in the Carbon X, which is their fast racing shoe. So this shoe is really aimed at the responsive side versus the stability side, or even versus the plush side of the Hoka line. So this falls into definitely being that light and nimble, which is what they're going for. It even says it right here on their sock liner. And I think that this shoe actually accomplishes that fairly well. A couple other little points here that I will just call out is that here in this section, you see some different little stat lines being called out. One of those is this S33x16. That's the spring of the shoe. So basically, there's a rocker in this. So again, if you're a Hoka fan, you know they like rockers. And this shoe has that type of shape, and you really get a view of it here where it sits like this, and that 33 and 16 is height of the toe off of the ground and height of the heel off of the ground. So it sort of provides that rocker type of feel. So it's not as aggressive like rocker as some shoes from Hoka line, but definitely it's got that rocker feel. From a V395, that's the volume in centimeters that the shoe has. And I think one of the things that I noticed in this shoe immediately was, even though it's a lightweight feeling shoe and a nimble, I guess, feeling shoe, to keep using Hoka's terms here, it's fairly wide. and has a lot of area for my foot to expand and not feel like it's cramped in there, which generally is not the case for a lightweight shoe, which is generally not the case for a faster feeling shoe. And one thing, when you kind of look down at this shoe from this height here, you can see that the outsole flares out. It flares out up here on the outside of the foot. It flares out on the heel. We can see that even more pronounced back here. And if you look at the bottom of the shoe in general, it's wide. It's as wide as their max cushion shoes from Hoka. So you've got a little bit of this cool, like, stability type of platform that's coming into play here, but they're doing it with this fast foam and without putting any mechanical things that are changing your gait. It's just providing sort of a wide landing zone. So you've got more comfort. You've got more ability for your toes to wiggle and maybe for your foot to swell up. But they do that in a way that still feels like you can get some turnover with this ProFly foam. Moving up to the upper here is a very simple upper. So just like the midsole's kind of no nonsense, the upper's a lot of that no nonsense too. Fully mesh upper with bonded overlays. So there's no additional stitching, which again keeps the weight down. You can run your hand kind of inside the shoe. There's no seams or anything like that to add rubbing points on your foot. It's just this sort of TPU overlay all the way around the shoe. Starts at the heel, runs all the way around, all the way through the toe, along the side and around the back. Additionally, there's some reinforcement points of that TPU again at the laces. So instead of adding metal eyelets or something along those lines, they've added this TPU, which lighter weight. So again, kind of keeping to that more minimal type of feel to this shoe. So the only thing I would say on this Rand and kind of the shoe is that even though it is lightweight, it doesn't drain super well because there's really nowhere for water to get out. Does a pretty good job of what it does, and very impressed with the fact that it's able to lock my foot in with really not much happening in terms of the upper. Again, there are no overlays or anything that's like creating that cradle-like a feel that you see in a lot of other shoes and some that I've even reviewed here in the recent past. What you see is basically what you get. There's nothing sandwiched in between the outside and the inside that's adding some sort of stability, but they did it. They did a nice job of keeping this shoe in a really kind of good middle ground where it's wide enough to let your foot feel relaxed, not too tight, but it also is a locked in feel where you feel like you can run downhill for a long time in this shoe and not have to worry about your foot kind of moving around all over the place. From a toe bumper standpoint, it's pretty lightweight. It is the upper that sort of brings itself up, but it is lightweight here on the rubber here. So again, this shoe's not about protection. It has kind of just enough of everything that it allows it to work well on the trail, but in the most rugged of conditions, this shoe's generally not sort of aiming towards that. And you can tell that by the materials on the upper, the outsole, and sort of the way that it's constructed. And then the last two things here that I'll point out are the heel cup. You do have a structured heel cup. If you look at this TPU overlay that's orange on the shoe, that's really where the structured portion of the heel cup starts and stops. And then up here at the top where there's the notch for the Achilles is where it has a little bit of flexibility to it. So medium padding here around the heel cuff, again, does a nice job of locking your foot in. And then lastly, you have a somewhat gusseted tongue. That gusset starts really at this third eyelet here and goes all the way down to the very bottom cross lace here at the bottom. And what that really does is it keeps the tongue from falling from side to side, keeps it centered up. And because it is a fairly nice padded tongue, which is an awesome addition that we're seeing a lot more companies sort of save weight in that area. I guess Hoka figured they saved enough weight on this shoe overall that they didn't have to do that. So you have a tongue that is padded that allows you to, cinch the laces down if you need to, or just add some volume and add some comfort into the top of your foot, especially if you're going to be wearing this shoe for a while. In closing, I think if you watch my reviews, what you're going to see is I have a tendency to gravitate towards do-it-all shoes. And I would put the Torrent 2 really in that conversation. It's a shoe that I don't have to think about like what terrain I'm gonna get on, what I'm gonna be doing. Am I gonna be on a treadmill? Am I gonna be on gravel or concrete or road or something really aggressive and rugged or just a buffed out trail? This shoe does well across all of those types of things. Where I think you want to think about this shoe and the really aggressive terrain is how long you're going to be on it for. Because really this outsole and the lack of a full-length rubber tread and just this exposure at the bottom here, it just adds to, I think, foot fatigue. You wear this, there's all these cutouts that are awesome because this shoe comes in at a low 9 ounces and a men's size 9, but they did that by saving some weight on the underneath side here. So rocks and thorns and that kind of stuff can poke through, and because it's not a maximalist cushion like other Hokas that don't have rock plates, you don't have that extra layer of protection. So yes, you have more ground feel, but you also have more ground feel, and that means that that kind of pressure can be felt. And I've had moments where I've stepped on something on my heel and it's landed right here in this spot and it feels like it's poking me in my heel, versus a speed goat or something like that, or something with a rock plate where a lot of that pressure gets deflected or dispersed throughout the midsole. The weight savings here, awesome. You're giving up protection for lightness. And in Hoka's world, they got a lot of protective shoes. So this shoe, where does it fit in? I think if you're doing that faster run, if you want an additional shoe to add to the stable, if you like the feel of Hoka's cushioning but you don't want a big stack height, if you don't have a tendency to run on really aggressive, sharp, rocky types of terrain all the time, this shoe works. I mean, it even works on that terrain, but it's just over time, I think that exposure to that terrain, for me, I feel it. What would I like to see? I'd love to see a thin rock plate in here and for them to shore up this bottom package with a full-length rubber tread. It would save some of this shearing, it would add more protection, and I think you'd have a shoe that you could do for legitimately anything without having to worry about it wearing down, shearing lugs, and some of that sort of foot fatigue from the aggressive terrain. That said, if you're somebody that doesn't have a sensitive foot, if you're somebody that's looking to get into Hokas, if you're somebody that doesn't mind a little bit of lack of protection for ground feel, you can do a lot in this shoe. And I have done a lot in this shoe and a second pair of Hoka Torrents too, after these ones met their end of life. So it's a shoe I like, I reach for it, it does a lot really well. It's really only when you extend, I think, into those really, really long distances or extremely rugged terrains, you might want to ask yourself a question about, is there enough protection here? So, questions, comments, feedback on the Torrent 2. What's your feelings of it? Do you feel like it has enough protection? Is it an approachable shoe from Hoka that maybe you didn't before because you didn't like that big stack height or the aesthetic wasn't for you? Leave comments like those and others below this video. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.